everybody, it's Mel. Thank you for joining me today for my February reading wrap-up. So in January I went through my stats, but I haven't worked out all of that for the month of February. So I can't tell you all of the stats, but I can tell you that in the month of February I finished 5 books. I don't know what my average rating was, and I don't know how many pages that was, but I did finish 5 books. 3 of those I read physically in print, 1 I read as an ebook, and 2 I listened to. And the best book that I had in the month was The Reappearance of Rachel Price. So that is all of the stats that I have been doing so far this year, well, that I did in January. Let me know if there is anything else that you want me to tell you in my brief little stats bit at the beginning. But anyway, for now, for February, that's all we're going to talk about. So let's just dive into the books and what I thought of them. So the first book that I'm going to talk about today is a book that I've been reading for a while. I started it in September, I think, last year, and I finally finished it in the month of February. I read it for one of my This booktuber made me do it, and it was actually for Jashana, and I have now uploaded that video, so I will link that in the description below if you want to go and check out the video, see what other books I read for it and what I thought of this book. I don't know if I mentioned, but it is So Many Beginnings by Bethany C. Morrow. I listened to this one on audio, and I know most people listen to audiobooks really fast. I'm the opposite. I listen to audiobooks quite slowly, so that is why it took me so long. Plus, the baby arrived a little bit earlier than expected, and so I just didn't listen to audiobooks. I didn't want to vlog more specifically, so that's why it's taken me this long. So I think I listened to the last probably third of it in February. So although I technically didn't read most of it in February, it is going in my February wrap-up. It is a remix of Little Women by Louise May Alcott. So when I say remix, I believe it's Penguin, potentially. I don't know whose idea it was, whether it was the publishers, whether it was an author, and they decided, I don't know how it all got decided, but I'm pretty sure it was Penguin, publishing a bunch of different books that are remixes of classics, and they take something, they take a sort of aspect of the book, or they do something to enable that classic to be reimagined from a different perspective. I'm not explaining this very well. So Many Beginnings was a remix of Little Women, and instead of it being, it was still about the March family, and it was still about the same characters, but instead of them being white women or white girls whose father is off fighting in the Civil War, it is black girls or black women who were slaves and have now been freed, and it's about a colony that has been set up, and it's about their experiences now that they are freed and what that means to them, what the Civil War has meant to them, what it's done, what it hasn't done, what hasn't been fixed, what the Proclamation Against Slavery has actually achieved for the regular people. It still follows the same beats, so we still follow Meg wanting to meet someone, marry. We still follow Jo, who's a writer, and writing about these things that are important to her, although in this instance, rather than it being from a feminist perspective, it's from a anti-racist, I should say, perspective. We still have Amy, who doesn't go off on the grand tour, which is what I'm pretty sure happens in Little Women, but she is a dancer in this one, and she goes to Boston to become a dancer at some point in the book. And we still have Beth, who has a similar trajectory to Beth in the original. But yeah, it is taking the original story and giving it a twist, so that instead of there being your typical classic that talks about white people from a white perspective, it is from a black perspective and looking at the same, it's still set in the same time period, and then having the same things happening around them, but it's how that affects them being black people who were slaves. I enjoyed it. I think I potentially would have enjoyed it slightly more had I listened to all in one go or actually read it physically, but I did really enjoy it. I thought it was really well written. I thought it was a really interesting concept. I gave it in the end a 3.1. So I have been doing the Peach system, which is something that I got from Erin Smith, who is actually a predominantly bullet journal YouTuber, but she also does talk about books. And the Peach system is a little bit simpler, I find, to compile, and I've found that it is more reflective of how I actually feel about books. So there's plot, enjoyment, artistry, so like writing style, that sort of thing, characters, and then I guess hype is what she called it, so sort of just vibes, etc. And yeah, like I said, I think it's been a little bit negatively affected by the length of time it took me to read. But I did really enjoy it. I thought it was well written. I mean, I did enjoy it. It was 3.1 or 3 stars. So, you know, it wasn't the best book I've ever read, but it was definitely worth a read. It was definitely interesting. And yeah, I'm glad that I read it. I think that it was, for me, it was a bit more of a sort of history lesson on, and the perspective is what I found interesting. So, yeah. The next book that I want to talk about is The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. I actually have that one here, which is this one. This is the final book in the Scholomance. Yes, it's lesson 3 of the Scholomance trilogy. So I read the first one. I feel like I read the first one in September as well, September, October. And then I read the second one in November, December, and then I read this one. I started in January and I finished it off in February. And I really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this entire series. I love Naomi Novik's writing style. This is told from the first person, so I don't know what her writing style is like in other books. I don't even know whether she writes in first person all the time, but I did enjoy the voice of the main character, who is, what is her name? I normally remember names, but I've just, Elle. Galadriel, actually. Can't believe I forgot that, but she's called Elle. So I won't talk too much about this particular book because, like I said, it's the final book in a trilogy. It is a book about a magical school called the Scholomance. It's a little bit different from most magical schools, though, because the reason why children go to this school, magical children go to this school, is because the act of doing magic creates, I guess, kind of like a rift that allows magical monsters into our reality who then prey on magical people. And the safest place, although it's not remotely safe, but the safest place for underage magicians is the Scholomance. Like I said, it's not remotely safe because there's this huge group of magical children who are doing all this magic but also less skilled. They are very attractive to these magical creatures, which are called Maleficaria. But yeah, so there's regular attacks, but even though it's unsafe, it's less unsafe than the actual rest of the world, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Because you are, even though you're congregated, which is what attracts them, the school itself has been set up so that it is magically protecting you, but also you are in a group so you can magically help each other. And we follow Elle, who has had a prophecy told about her that she's going to end up being a great evil sorceress. She doesn't want to be a great evil sorceress, but this what's the word I'm looking for? This destiny that has been prophesied for her means that like all of the magic that she attempts to do ends up being evil in some way, and she ends up getting all of these bad spells, but she tries to use them for good things, so she actually tries to do really good with them. And yeah, it's really interesting. I like the voice. It's, like I said, first person, and you really feel Elle's character through the way she's written, which I really, really enjoyed. It's a really interesting way of writing like a magical school, and yeah, I just thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was well written, and I really, really enjoyed the series. I gave this particular one 4 I think it ends up being like 4.3 or something like that. in The Peach, which I rounded up, I think, to 4.5 stars. And yeah, definitely would recommend this series if you like fantasy, magic schools, that sort of thing. The third book that I'd like to talk about today is The Stationery Shop of Tehran by Marjan Kamali, or possibly The Stationery Shop. I'm not sure, I've seen both, but anyway, the version I got from the library was The Stationery Shop of Tehran. So this is it's one of those books that follows a person throughout their lives, basically, and it jumps around from different timelines. So we follow this young woman who is living in Iran and in Tehran, and it's about her first love when she was a teenager. She meets this young man in the stationery shop, which is also a bookshop, and they develop this romance, which is very much, I guess, egged on by the owner of the shop. But they come from kind of different castes, and while her parents are very for this relationship, his mother is very against it. They decide they're going to get married anyway, and it's about their relationship, but then he's very political, he's very involved in the policies of the time, and he disappears, and the stationery shop owner is telling her that he's okay, that he's disappeared for his safety because of this political upheaval, but they never see each other again. And then she is helped to move on. She moves to America, she goes to university, she meets someone else, they get married, she has this whole life, and then she meets a young man, sort of like mid-20s, I think, who runs this stationery / bookstore, and she figures out that he is the son of this young man that she was in love with when she was a teenager. And so they reconnect, and then they find out what really happened way back when. But because you're swapping backwards and forwards, you're finding out more about this actual story and what actually happened than they know. So you're kind of, you're watching them figure it out whilst you know, but you're also finding out as you go through because you're reading from the perspective from when they are kids and that storyline is happening. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't think I've heard anyone on BookTube talk about it. In fact, I don't think I'd heard of it really before at all. The only reason I came across it is because for a bunch of different prompts for my TBR game, I wrote quite specific prompts this year rather than writing like read a BIPOC author. I wrote particular kind of areas of the world. So I wrote read a book written by a person from Western or Central Asia, written by a person from Eastern Europe, written by a person from Central or South America, etc. As a way to try and, because it's easy enough to sort of say, okay, I'll read a BIPOC author, I'll read an author who is a Black American, which is fine and perfectly legit, but at the same time it'd be nice to branch out even more. So that was the point behind it, but because I'd written these specific prompts, I thought rather than on camera having to look up, what's an author, I thought I'd get myself a list of potential authors / books for those prompts when they came up. So that's what I did, and I came across this particular book, and it sounded really interesting. The library had it, so I thought that I would read it. And yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well written. I enjoyed the writing style. I enjoyed the perspectives. I love books that jump around like that from different time periods, which I just think it's really fun and really clever. So I ended up giving this one a 4.5 stars. And yeah, I definitely would recommend, if you enjoy those sorts of books, I would highly recommend this one. I think that it is very much a book that should be read, and very much a book that I've not heard anyone talk about, so I'd love to hear some more people read it and talk about it. Next up, I read the reappearance even of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. So this is a standalone book by the same author that wrote the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which is a series that I absolutely loved. This is also a young adult sort of crime book. We follow Belle, and Belle, when she was, I want to say like 2 or 3, her mother disappeared, and her mother disappeared from the car that Belle was in, and Belle was found in the car all the doors were shut, all the windows were up, the heater was up really high, it was really, really cold, it was very snowy, but Belle was perfectly fine because all the heaters were on and everything she was set up to be okay, but the mother had disappeared and no one knows what happened to her. Her body was never found, no one ever knew what had happened to her. And then when Belle is 18, so what's that, 16 years later? Does it say that? Yes, 16 years it is, she was 2. 16 years later, the family is asked to do a documentary about Rachel's disappearance. So they agree to do this. They've not really done much before, but they agree to do it this time. Yeah, they're making the documentary, and then just suddenly Rachel reappears. Belle actually finds her walking along the street. And as you can imagine, this causes all sorts of confusion. And it is about what actually happened to Rachel, why she disappeared, did she disappear due to under her own steam. She tells everyone that she was kidnapped and held captive, but there are certain elements of her story that Belle finds she doesn't quite believe, and so it's Belle unraveling Rachel's story and what really happened. The twists and turns in this are fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed this one. I thought it was really, really well written. I loved the end result, what actually happened. Very much not what I expected. I don't read as many of these sorts of books as other people, so I feel like I don't get them as quickly as other people, but I didn't see what had happened coming. And yeah, I loved the reveal of it. It was very mysterious and incredible, and there was just so many twists and so many reveals at the end that I was gobsmacked, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoy Holly Jackson's writing style. I think she writes really well, really interestingly, and yeah, I just thought it was really exciting, really fun, real page turner. Couldn't put it down. I mean, obviously I did, but it was one of those books that, I could have quite easily just sat and read all day, but, you can't always. Anyway, I gave this one 5 stars, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. If you enjoy thrillers, if you enjoyed the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, definitely recommend. I thought it was really well done, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then the final book that I finished that I'm going to talk to you about is Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I finally read this book. If you have been around on my channel for like the last year or so, you would know that I have put this book on countless TBRs and I never get to it, and I don't really know why. But I finally read it in February and I really, really enjoyed it. It is the second book in the Six of Crows duology. In this one we follow the same characters, so we have the 6 crows. They are all... Sorry if the angle has changed slightly, I had to... what am I even trying to say? I had to change the battery. Anyway, yes, so I finally read this book. So this is the second book in the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo, which is a duology set in the Grishaverse. So Shadow and Bone and that whole trilogy is the Grishaverse. It's the first series in the Grisha universe. The Grisha are magic users in this universe. This is not about Ravka, which is where the magic users are from, or where they're... it's a long... The Grisha army is based in Ravka. This is set in a different part of the world, and we follow the 6 criminals who are part of the same gang, and we follow them after the events of Six of Crows. So in Six of Crows they did this big heist and broke some people out of prison, out of this really well-guarded prison, and this one is about sort of what happened after that, and they do a bunch of illegal stuff and they try and rescue some people. I won't go into any more detail because spoilers, and it's, a duology and etc. It's the second book. But yeah, I did really, really enjoy this one. I knew that I would, and yet I kept putting it off. I don't know why, but I thought it was really well written and really, really fun. It is very twisty and turny. It is written from different perspectives, so it's written in the third person, but we follow the different members of the crows, the six members of the crows. So we follow like Jesper, Nina, all the different crows. And a bunch of different things happened. We get to follow we really see their different personalities, which is really fantastic. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Six of Crows, so I'm not at all surprised that I enjoyed this one. I'm just glad I finally got to it. I gave this one a 4.7, which I rounded up to 5 stars because that's might as well be 5 stars. So under the peach rating scale, I gave it 5 stars. And yeah, like I said, rounded up to 5 because I thought it was really good and really fun and really well written. Just trying to see what else I said about this one. Yeah, pretty much everything I said has been written. Everything I've said is what I wrote. Really enjoyed it. Glad I finally read it, finally finished the duology, so I can kind of get that sort of Damocles, which has been hanging over my head, to stop hanging over my head. And yeah, I definitely would recommend if you enjoy fantasy. It is young adult, but I definitely think it's worthwhile. I think it's a lot of fun. That's all I really have to say about it, but definitely enjoyed it. And then I also want to talk about the Ministry for the Future. I want to say a quarter of the way into this book. So this is one of the books that I was supposed to read in February, and yeah, I've read a quarter of it, which means if you are watching my TBR game, which means that in April I can count it as read for the purposes of whether I get a reward or a punishment, because for a book this size I did say I had to read a quarter of it for it to be counted, which I have done, but it's continued into March. So I won't go into detail about it, but just to say that I'm still working on this one. But yeah, that's everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. Don't have anything else to say. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of the books that I talked about, if you enjoyed them. If you didn't, let me know all of that in the comments below. Let me know your favourite book of the month of February. Like I said, my favourite was The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. So let me know what you think of this one if you've read it, and yeah, like I said, whichever book was your favourite in February. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me a drop of blood emoji because of all the blood we have on this cover. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.